Chugga 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 woo woo! Welcome to Tabletop Totality. I'm Frank.
I'm Steve.
This is Neil.
And this is Cody.
Today we're going to be talking about railroading a campaign with the role-playing game. So, where should we get started?
There's just so
as
much.
the conductor DM here, I'm going to tell you where we're going to get started. First of all, you're an adventurer. You're not starting in a tavern because we're starting in the woods.
Oh. Damn.
This is almost like
Does your character
fascism.
does your character's got a backstory or something?
Yeah, but here's
I don't care. I'm here to tell you my story.
Well, I wanted to go chop down this tree over here.
No, you can't. That tree's been there for 1,000 years.
Oh. Darn.
My character's afraid of forests, and they wouldn't be.
Doesn't matter. Forests are everywhere. You can't avoid forests.
Oh,
If they knew that you were born with a fear of forests, they would have stopped you from ever becoming an adventurer.
but trees killed my parents.
No.
It's in my backstory. So I think we're getting a little off the rails here, which is actually kind of funny. So what is railroading? I would say the definition of railroading is a great example is actually there's a Call of Cthulhu campaign, and it takes place on a train, and as you progress, you go from one cabin to the next until it's over, and you can't really get outside of the train. So in general, if you compare that to just general railroading of a campaign as is, that's kind of what it is there's predefined spots and locations, and veering off of that to kind of do what you or your character wants, or even the party, doesn't necessarily happen because the DM may only have certain things planned out, causing the campaign to only go in that one direction. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I would say so. If anything, it's I always look at it as just a DM or overlord just wanting to tell their story and really not allow the players to add anything into the mix, which is not really the case. It's very much the overlord giving, hey, here's what's going on, try and save it, and I'll give you interesting stuff along the way, and the player's creating the story. So it's very interesting in that manner.
Okay, that actually brings up an interesting question then. So there's a lot of similarities on both sides. So where's the difference happen for you? Between like a generic like campaign compared to like a railroad? Where did the two kind of break off of each other?
So your railroad is strictly, for me, it is, all right, this strict thing needs to happen. It's this key point, is if that doesn't happen, nothing happens. Where in a other campaign setting, there's multiple different ways to reach checkpoint A.
Oh, okay.
And in a railroad, it funnels, there's only one way to get to checkpoint A. Anything else can be whatever, but you still have to check off that one way to get there.
Okay. Well, what about you guys? Do you guys have similar feelings to that?
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. Like, that's a pretty succinct way of putting it, where it's like, you can't progress until you defeat this one enemy. It's like, okay, well, we're not strong enough to defeat the enemy, so can we do something else instead? No, you have to defeat this guy. Well, it's impossible. We can't. We're not strong enough. We can't. Well, you have to. Why? Because that's the way my story is going. That's the way that I want it to happen. Basically, instead of it being the game that the party wants to play, it's the story that the DM wants to tell, and the DM can't think. And the main reason for railroading is the DM can't think of other ways to tell that story or other ways around it besides the one way that they've thought of. And so, it's just sort of I don't want to, be negative or anything, but it's kind of a lack of creativity on the DM's side of not being able to see more than one path through anything other than the one that they've decided to put in your way. So, it's a lot of the times it's a pretty negative thing. I would think.
I almost think that it's more a commonplace with less experienced players and less experienced DMs, because I feel like when you're just like first like getting into this, like maybe you don't know enough about proper storytelling or about this, collaborative role play that you're trying to do. Like maybe you just don't have the right equipment, the right mindset at that time. And I think as the DM, I think especially for new DMs, I think that sometimes they might get in their head like, I'm in charge, like I'm running the game, I'm the rules, I'm the law at the table, and that's not really the case, and we've said this a bunch of times about, it's not the story that we're making at the table, it's the story that the DM wants to tell. And that's where you really start to feel like you're on the tracks, like you're being sent where necessarily you don't want to go. And I feel like that happens a lot more often too when a story is less complex, when a story is very linear, where there's just defined like this has to happen so that this can happen so that this can happen. Yep. You have to see this point to get to the middle point, to get to the big battle, and then it's over. And if you don't follow that exact form, like the DM starts panicking, the DM starts panicking because you're going into uncharted territory. And I'm running a game right now, which is, I'm not trying to brag, but I'm just saying I'm running a game right now where I have let my players say, we want to go here, we want to go there. And that's how the story is progressing. And that doesn't mean that things don't happen where they're not at. And I've told them that. And I want them to have to make decisions. And even if I'm wanting to direct them towards something, I make it's a possibility that they can do it. I don't try to stop people from doing it. Mm-hmm. I just try to make them say, okay, if you're going to go here, things are going to happen without you. Like that's just the world. Even though the camera lens per se is on the characters, it doesn't mean that the world stops when they're not on the screen. That's true. The metaphorical screen
or the stage.
Right. And I feel like railroads happen when your campaigns are less dynamic, when the story is less complex, and it's just very straightforward. And I feel like it's kind of like a rookie thing to just be like, I'm going to force my friends through this story instead of I'm going to set the stage and my friends are going to try to navigate through this story. Yeah, and we're gonna see what happens together.
I will say, so there is a lot of negative connotations with railroading. It's very much, a lot of people will talk about it, and it'll be very much what we're talking about. It limits what your players can do and stuff like that. I believe there is a right way to railroad and a wrong way to railroad. Mm-hmm. And this might be the most controversial thing I say in this podcast right now.
Ever. Neil, be careful. Okay? Just be careful. We've worked very hard on this business.
But I believe there is a needed aspect of railroading.
I agree with you 100%.
There is a needed aspect of it. It's very much how you need to tell a story. There's heroes and there's villains. You know what I mean? And that's very much what things like Dungeons and Dragons, Call of Cthulhu, your protagonists are going. That has to happen. There's certain points in storytelling that have to happen. Mm-hmm. It's allowing those things to manifest naturally or forcing them to manifest, which is, I believe, really where the term of railroading comes from. If you're forcing your characters to feel a certain way, that's railroading negatively.
Yes.
If it's
even just forcing them into a situation like
but I could be pressing a plot by forcing people saying, hey, there's an attack coming along on this village, and if you're going to save them and fight off whatever's going on, now I've given you more precedence and more of a railroading feel to go to this area.
But you've also given them the choice.
But that's not railroading because you're giving them the choice. I'm thinking more or less where it's like, we want to go to Hatha. No, you're not going to Hatha. You're going to Atlas. Well, we wanted to stop off at Hatha. Well, you can't because the road's closed. All right, well, then we'll go through the woods. Well, the woods are currently on fire.
I don't know.
That's like I'm trying to basically rip up the tracks for every other direction and send you where I want you to go. That's railroading to me.
I don't feel like, to me personally, that's not railroading. To me, that's kind of
just being a dick.
Yeah, that's being a dick.
I mean, it is an extreme railroading situation to do something like, to be like, every other path is welcome to the Silent Hill version of this world where all the roads are leading to vast chasms of nothing except for this one road where you can go. Like that's like extreme railroading, but you can do it in a way that is sort of natural, like Neil was saying, where it's like you kind of have to force the players to act. And I feel like the only times where it kind of works, where it could kind of work in a positive way, is if you have disruptive players or if you have unacting players.
Oh my lord, that's such a great point, Steve, because that's where I use a lot of my rail.
Yeah, like if you have characters that are just like dicking around, like even if it's not all of them, but if it's a couple of them and they're just dicking around, and you're like, hey guys, Lich is gonna come and kill everybody, like you gotta stop, and they're like, oh, but we want to fool around in the village and do a bunch of it's like, okay, the Lich comes and kills everybody in the village now because you didn't stop him. Now go do something about him. Or conversely, like they're like, if there's players that are like, we want to hang out in the village and we don't want to leave because we're worried that our characters are going to get hurt. We don't want our characters to die, so we're just gonna hang around the village and just be friends with the NPCs. It's like, okay, well, the Lich comes and kills everybody in the village, so go deal with it.
I just have to, off of that statement, Steve, I have to make one point not related to anything of this.
Yeah.
If you are playing Dungeons and Dragons or Call of Cthulhu or any other tabletop RPG and you are scared of your player character dying, like there's a difference of being like not wanting that to happen and then like actively going out and being like, yeah, my character's not going to die today.
Yeah.
Just why are you playing?
Dude, I've listened to a ton of stories where player characters don't just not want to die, they don't want to get hurt at all. And I'm not talking about like wizards where it would make sense. I'm talking about like barbarians. Like I've heard stories about barbarians that are like level 10 that take like 5 points of damage.
I'm not in the tower.
Yeah, where it's like you have barbarians that are like they take 5 points of damage, and the out of character the player starts screaming at the cleric for being like, why aren't you healing me? And everybody else, why'd you let me take damage? I'm not supposed to take damage. It's like, you're the tank. That's your whole deal. It's like, no. No,
but anyway,
I think we're getting
this back into the conversation.
Let's get back on track here. Let's get back on the tracks.
I'm so sorry to everybody for this podcast and all the puns.
This is why railroading is important. It's because it keeps you on track when you get too far off topic.
All right, now, I think we should break it down into a few different things.
I don't even think like a lot of what you guys are just saying was like even railroading. I just think that's like doing your job as the gamekeeper. Like, you are supposed to be like, you're the director, you're supposed to be like moving things along. Maybe you're not the director, you're the producer. You're just trying to move things along. So like, when people are just doing stupid things, then okay, something random happens, or you want to guide them towards something. I get that, but that's why I think railroading is negative to me, because it's like, you're basically abusing your station. In my mind, I
have had people call me out on some of the things that I do that are not railroading. It's re-guiding in my eyes.
No, war crimes are not excusable. We've already been over this.
and it's me just trying to re-guide the party, but people are like, oh, you don't let me have any fun, this is railroading, and I'm like, no. Like, stop.
Yes, that goes against the Gygax convention of 87. I just want you to know that now. I think so. I'm going to lay a scenario out. So if you're in a dungeon and you're moving through the dungeon and every room is planned for, and you're just urging the players to go on, it's not necessarily railroading, because you already have everything kind of figured out and how things are going to happen. I think railroading kind of takes in place when they're moving through your story, because you have to have things set, for your story to happen. So they're fixed points, right? They don't necessarily have to happen when you intended them to, though. And that's where the railroading kind of, when you have a set track of how things have to go, and you're not necessarily forcing, but you're coercing everything to follow that, instead of potentially, wild card players jumping from, plot number 7 to 8, or even farther, like to 10, without necessarily having the background behind it. Mm-hmm. And being like, well, you can't go there until you have this. That's kind of railroading. Yeah. Like, you need the key to go there. You need to get the key to go into this building to get the information or the thing that you need.
No,
to a degree that, to a degree, well, but if it's magical. So to a degree that is railroading, and that's not bad railroading.
Yeah.
It's just bad when you're, always doing that.
I think it depends on how you as the overlord presents it to your players. There's a way to disguise what people would consider railroading because of the way your verbiage is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's certain points in times, I think the difference is, and we've all hit on it already, is here you have something planned. All right, they have to be able to get this, like talk to this person to do this, where now the player thinks of a different idea around it, and you're not now going, like, you're not even giving thought to taking that idea that could solve the problem. You're like, nope, I'm not even going to worry about that because I don't have a plan for you. Your idea doesn't work. It has to be this. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like, it's a DM who's scared to improvise, if you will. Yeah. Which is kind of one of the best things you could do as a DM, because it makes some of the best moments of play.
Well, and I think that's part of our, that's part of our job for what we're trying to do here as Tabletop Totality, is we're trying to encourage people to do this sort of stuff. And I'm not trying to be dismissive when I was saying things like, stories being more linear or things like that. Yeah. Because I'm comfortable where I'm at from the years of doing it and the story and my knowledge of the story, that I feel that I don't have to have necessarily everything planned out. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like it gives me working room to make things happen and to adjust to the story that my players are helping me create. So I kind of avoid a lot of the pitfalls for like railroading, because I have options open to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's also allowed me to make like transitions where we had a player who left the table and another player joined. We've had like cameos of different players, and having that flexibility allows you to kind of make it what you need it to be when you need it to be it. So a lot of what we were talking about, like for the railroading stuff, like I kind of consider like you're doing your job as a dungeon master. And I think it could just be easy for you to be called a railroad or whatever if you're just strictly following what you have planned out on paper or what you're reading out of a book. Because that's almost like you're basically denying your players a dimension of their experience. because you're giving them something that's just two-dimensional. You're giving them something that you're involved with because you're reading it from the book or you're reading it from your notes, and they're just being thrown at it, but they're not getting to influence it, and they're not getting to, mold it in any sort of way.
Right on. It's kind of like when you're playing a video game and you're fighting the boss, and it's like Zelda is a good opportunity to talk about, where you had to use certain weapons to affect the certain bosses in a certain way, so then this and that, the other thing could happen, right? And being able to influence by jumping in and doing something different that wasn't planned for definitely can change the outcome or just the experience in general. Kind of to bounce off of what Cody was saying there.
Yeah. No, I think that was put very well.
Yeah. Now, one thing I think that I would like to talk about real quick is, especially for newer people or just people who haven't fully explored their world or created it yet, is if players want to go to a location that you are not ready to do anything with, instead of just saying no, I think the better thing to tell them, so this way it's not perceived as railroading, is I have not planned for that yet. I don't have the maps, or I don't have this ready. So, if you guys don't mind, can we do that next time and just go through the things that I kind of have prepared right now before you go into, the swamps of Kowloon or whatever, So I think I don't want people to get the wrong interpretation of, many people just aren't prepared for certain things because every player is a wild card to a degree that you are never going to have everything that you need. Kind of like what Cody was saying earlier, where they're going to throw things at you and you're not going to be prepared.
Yeah.
And you just have to adapt in a way, or, conduct it in a different way.
I view the plot holes in my overall world not as a negative thing. Like, if I was writing a story or writing a book or whatever, it would piss me off. If I was watching a movie or something, I would hate the movie. But because it's this moving thing, it's got all these moving parts, I'm happy having those blank spaces because they're just tools in my arsenal, that I can just fill something in where needed. I had a very faint idea of something that when Steven joined the game is now a major plot point. Because it adapted that way, but it flowed naturally. It wasn't a forced thing.
Yeah.
It was like we started talking about stuff and we were like, oh, that's kind of cool. And because I had it as only maybe a single dimension of it figured out, just a loose construct of this idea of what it would be, when Steve started rattling off ideas and telling about his character, it was easy for me to then say, well, now this is where I'm going to take this,
Yeah.
I'm going to take Steve's ingredients and add it in with mine and make a good goulash.
Yeah,
baby.
Love goulash.
Oh, I do too.
So, okay.
I would even, if I could add in one point as well.
You may not.
Oh, damn.
Overruled.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to overrule you because I'm the overlord. Boom. But
I think Cody announced
there's only room enough for one cowboy in this ranch.
I think that Cody said that he was the DM conductor at the top of the thing. So
yeah, what's better, the overlord or the DM conductor?
I mean,
nobody knows. But anyway, so my point.
Not today, Warlock.
Yeah.
Not today, conductor.
Not today.
Yeah. The one spot that's really good as a DM or the overlord to be able to do is, all right, you did your session, you finished your session, everybody's wrapping up, and you go to your players and you go, or as you're talking about when your next session is going to be, you ask them, hey, what's your guys' plan for next session? And that,
I do it all the time.
That is
all the time.
The easiest way to make your players feel like they are not being railroaded, because you're going to them and you're saying, hey, what do you guys want to do? They go to you and they'd be like, yeah, I want to go to this area, and this area because we have these issues. And you go, all right. And you're literally planned for that.
Yep.
And that's conducting in the right direction.
Yeah, I always end my session. I always look at where we ended, and then I look at where they could potentially go, and I sit there at the table and I go, hey guys, like, what are you thinking? You know, what does your character think of this place, or what's their intentions?
Yep.
You know, and that's just like I think like sometimes people think that the storyteller, the gamekeeper, the overlord, that they have to be like omniscient, like they just know everything and they're always ready, and that's just not true. Like everybody's human. I mean, well, I think you guys are human.
I don't know about that.
I'm actively pretending to be one, but
You're just a giant bear. Yeah.
yes. I'm taking a normal human shit.
It is how humans talk. Yes.
Is that a diaper?
Off the rails.
Oh, bird feeders.
Oh my God.
Is that? I guess a bear and a squirrel for that one are very similar.
Yeah, I do a lot of work with squirrels.
We keep
feel
making
like
all these stops, but we need to get back on track, guys. Come on now.
I feel like the context of bears and diapers relating to one another is going to be lost on like a lot of people.
Not
Yeah,
your
so
folk.
I'm just gonna too long didn't read this for you. Some people hunt bears with baby diapers because bears will eat baby poop because it's not as thoroughly digested as adult poop. So
Black bears specifically, right? Like
no, just bears.
bears in general. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know that they were having. I remember reading an article where they're having trouble in it was like an Arctic town with polar bears like going in for diapers and stuff. Yeah.
Today's topic is diapers.
No, never, ever, ever.
Let's
get back on track. All right, railroads.
The puns are killing me slowly. Yeah, but so as I said, it's very much the how you disguise your railroad to make your players believe it's their decision to do something and not your overarching scheme.
Yeah, to bounce off of that, it's about intention, perception, and the ability for the players to influence.
Yes.
That make it not a railroad. Because if I can go to a market and I can buy something and I can speak with a few people and potentially, make friends or something that you didn't necessarily plan for, and then it's going to make my experience better. And then as your plot and your things start to unfold, I'm going to be more willing because I'm investing more. Whereas I feel a lot of the view of railroading is they don't have enough time or the ability to invest in personal things that they want to make them want to put in more effort into that scenario, which then cascades into them just staying on a linear path like the railroad itself.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just kind of what I've been picking up from you guys as we go through and talk about it.
Word.
Well, yeah, if you don't add any detail to your railroad, it just looks like a railroad. But if you add a bunch of detail to it, it no longer looks like a railroad.
And the ability...
Well, I like to do things like I just like to do things that's like I don't know if you would consider these like railroad tactics, but even setting time limits for things like just saying like there's an impending thing that's gonna happen. Like just having that in the back of people's heads, like there's something that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like that is just it compounds everything that they're dealing with, and I personally love creating so many options that my players have to sit there and be like, well, if we ignore these people, they're going to fail. Or if we let this go on for too long, it's going to get crazy, and they have to, they're at the point now where my party keeps splitting up because they're trying to handle all the things that are going on. And that's not like, I'm not trying to hinder them. I'm just trying to, so that they can experience as much of the world as they want. And I feel like that's like the biggest complaint about like role-playing games, especially role-playing video games, is people are like, I don't get to do enough shit.
Yeah, I don't get to experience this stuff outside of the quest line.
Right. Like, I don't get to do enough things. You know, that was like, it's like when they imported, Bethesda like imported like Skyrim's crafting mechanics into Fallout. And it was like, I can't even tell you how money, how long people spent building shit and like, their workshops. And I just feel like you have to let people experience your world. Like that's the whole point of it.
Yeah. And I think that might have led into a lot of stuff with railroading, people's experiences with RPGs, like video games. And then they look at that and they go, oh, this is how you make a story in an RPG. You have you have one quest line, you have one main quest line, and that's where your party needs to go. And you just need to go from point A to point B to point C to point D. And you have to just lead them there. And there can be some little things along the way, but they're not really super important to the story. But like the story is the story, and that's where it has to go, because this is the example that I'm using is, Final Fantasy or whatever, where it's like there's one big
Don't you ever talk bad about Final Fantasy, Steve.
Well, I'm just saying, Final Fantasy is...
How dare you?
I'm sorry, Neil. It's like... So Dragon Quest, to use...
How dare you talk about Dragon Quest?
I for sure thought he was going to besmirch the name of Legends of the Dragoon.
Oh, I thought for sure. I was about ready to leave.
Yep. We're going to trash this business.
But yeah, no,
Burn it all down.
I agree with you, Steve. I see what you're saying. Like, a lot of your RPGs was, hey, there's this bad guy, go finish it, and here's the stops you need to do.
Yeah.
Also, I think a lot we keep referring to the same kind of like, oh, you got to deal with the bad guy, you got to deal with this. I feel sometimes that a lot of too much direct RP can also be railroady, where it's not so much like kind of an option where it's like, oh, well, now you have to tell these people what you've discovered. It's like, okay, the first few times that can be easy, or if it's more natural, it can be very easy and you're willing to do it. But if it's like every time you get to the next big city, you have to start from the beginning and go through it all. And then next thing you know, you've been talking to the DM for an hour about everything your characters have experienced. I feel sometimes that can also be a bit railroady, because especially if you're making people walk through the steps that they took, instead of just, all right, so here's the things that we're going to fill them in on, here's the things that we're not. And then doing a quick RP or a quick Q&A, I feel can give more of that agency back. And I feel that's where a lot of the railroady is in the agency of the player and not the agency of the DM. Does that work for everybody? Right?
No,
I see what you're saying.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not saying RP's bad. I love to RP a little too much.
Yeah, no, I like when you have to tell everybody all of your successes or what you've done. Like at a certain point in the world, your name should be starting to be known if you've been doing all these big events. Like,
well, it's also like that's like what Steve was saying. Like that's like the traditional role-playing game, like in video games. It's, you have discovered the crystal in the dragon's cave, so now you must bring the crystal to the halls of Imreldris. And it's like you always have to go do like the next thing. Like there's always somebody telling you what to do.
Yeah.
And that is, I can see how people are like, oh yeah, like that's how you run this game. That's how you do it. And I think we haven't fully gotten the open world, like the full open world, like video game yet. Like even even like Skyrim, things like that, like, yeah, they're open world to an extent, but you can't literally affect everything. You can't change everything. There's certain aspects that are like, there's certain plot lines that are always going to happen. Like, they're always going to pan out.
I think Breath of the Wild is the closest that's gotten to that point. But even that has a story that you don't necessarily have to really do, but like that's maybe the closest to an open. But even then, there's still you beat the first area of the game, and then a quest opens up that is destroy Ganon. So
like
there is an end goal, but
the age-old thing is if a regular video game RPG cannot change with the player as easily, like all the work and all the information that game would have to randomize, like to be able to go along with whatever the player is doing is almost impossible.
Yeah.
But guess what can easily do it instead?
Yeah.
People's brains.
D&D. Call of Cthulhu. All those things have that capability because you easily have that capability. Mm-hmm. If you might plan out, all right, like that's why the beauty of planning out what should happen on your quest should just be as simple. All right, I think I'm going to have this type of villain. This is what they're going to be planning. This is where my adventures are going to start. And you just do little tidbits of everything else. So you have an overarching view. Mm-hmm. And then you just let it play out. And however it plays out, you're just changing and going along with the course. And I think that's the easiest, that's the difference between creating a railroading quest line where you're making it just like a video game would and making a more dynamic quest line where as a DM, it might take, everybody thinks it takes a little bit more time, but it's actually less planning in a way because you're just letting things slowly unfold as they go. Yeah. So maybe you haven't crossed all your I's and dotted all your T's for every single thing. That helps you in that sense. Where if it was a video game like Cody was saying or a movie, you'd be like, oh, this is the worst thing I've ever played in my life.
So
Michael Bay.
Yeah, Michael Bay.
Explosions.
Yeah, everything blows up in a Michael Bay movie. I've done it. I've railroaded. I have conducted myself in that way before.
Get out. Get out right now. You're fired.
I also thought that's how you DM'd.
Yeah.
That's how things worked. When I first started, it's all right, here's this quest line. You need to do this, this, and this to be able to do this, and that's that.
I think all 2 times I've DM'd, I've done it that way, where it's like, no, you need to go do this, and you need to get this. You need to have this. You
can't kill that guy. He's the ultimate bad guy.
Hey, guys, if you kill that guy, the adventure's over. Please.
So I think one of the things that I've started to do just in the general in life when I'm prepping for a campaign is I figure out, all right, what are the beats? Like what things have to happen like that you can't get around in order for the story to be told, right? And then I step back and I look at it. I say, okay, can any of those be moved around? Sure. Okay, this could be this could be that. Or no, these are fixed points. All right, so now how do you work around those? And let's say if the party's moving too quick, here's some random encounters that they can deal with. Mm-hmm. If they're moving too slow, I don't need to incorporate these random encounters. They can just kind of move along because there is nothing worse than planning for like, oh, they're going to move so fast. Like I only have 5 hours, so I need to do this, and that. I need to get right to the end because they're expecting a one-shot campaign for the night and they're going to be cruising along, and I'd rather be prepared than unprepared.
I'm so bad at that.
Yeah, and then they only get like a quarter of the way through it, and then they're giving you shit like it's your fault. And you're like, hey, I gave you all the agency in the world. Y'all didn't take it and move with it. You know, I am not forcing you to do anything. I literally just said, you have to get to this place at some point. You guys stayed in that town. You stayed in the outhouse trying to get the body out for an hour and a half. out of the 5 hours that we had to play.
Yeah,
That's
you
your
guys
fault.
did.
Yeah, that's your fault. That's not the DM.
You're like, I'm gonna try to spear it.
Yep. And we got it out.
You guys did get it out, and you got a bag of holding out of it.
Yep.
So
And that's the kind of stuff that needs to. It takes two, right? It takes the players and it takes the DM, GM, overlord, right?
So you're saying it takes two to conduct a train?
Well, you do need to have a caboose.
baby, me and you.
So
You're saying it takes two to make a game go right.
Yep.
It takes two to make it out of sight.
let's not get sued here.
Come on, ride the train.
I'm sorry for that pitch perfect parody.
So
ride it.
it's not always necessarily the DM trying to railroad you when they're trying to keep the game moving, so you're not in and out house the whole time. And that people need to take that into consideration. Just because you want to do this weird kooky thing and you think it's funny, there are other people there with you. You should consider them, and you should try and at least keep working with the DM and keep the story moving, because it can be fun, but it can get old.
That's like, is it one of the last episodes that Ryan was on Critical Role in the first season? And his character is like a sorcerer. He's a dragonborn sorcerer. And he finally, like, they had a pretty big group, and he finally, like, gets his turn, and he took, like, the longest fucking turn. Like, I don't even, it was so annoying. I remember watching it and just being, like, so annoyed. And you could tell, like, Travis was pissed at him. Like, a bunch of people were pissed off at him. And to an extent, like, that's Matt's fault, because, like, Matt let that continue. And at a certain point, it's like, it's not like you're railroading as so much as that you're doing your job of, like, keeping the game moving, you know? And, like, that's kind of like why, like, I've tried to implement, like, no one wants to watch one character shop for 2 hours. Like, nobody wants that shit. So I just email my guys, or I just tell my guys, email me when you send me your new character sheet. Like, if you have money for something and you want to buy it and you're in a place where I think it's available, just tell me and I'll figure it out, you know? Or ask me, hey, we're going to the biggest city in your world. Do you think it's possible for me to get a cloak of protection there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, you can. And it'll cost you this much, you know?
I think to bounce on that, Cody, a little bit, is sometimes it is necessary to have the interaction, but before you start the interaction, from personal experience, it may be a good thing to set like a timer and just be like, all right, like, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to RP your heart out, but after that 5 minutes, you need to have purchased that item and get the hell out. So this way we can keep the story moving. Because that can be a big moment, just buying.
Because honestly, I've always loved, as the DM, bringing my characters into weird shops and letting them RP with the shopkeeper that is there.
Yes, that is a fun thing to do. I just think, like,
not 5 hours worth though.
like, I would want my players to at least have an idea of what they're looking for. You know, and like, if I was gonna throw some things out there, like those random magic items I threw out when we were playing Call of Cthulhu in the shop. Like, you were like, oh, the coin, and everybody, like, Steve had the horn and everything. Like, those are just things that I just threw out. Like, those, like, that's just what I had in my head.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, I just keep thinking. I just keep thinking back to one of the best representations of the railroad versus, like, the sandbox would be Matt Covell from MCDM Games. He's got a YouTube channel, website. They published a really awesome book for 5th edition. He breaks down the railroad and he breaks down the sandbox by using both The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, the stories, not the movies. And he explains that, like, the DM had, like, all of Middle Earth and everything planned out, and he wanted the campaign to take place in, like, the East or whatever, or, like, in the West. And when he showed his players the map and they saw the Lonely Mountain and they saw the dragon, they said, well, what's that? What is this? and the player, the DM's like, oh well, that's the Lonely Mountain. It was the Dwarven kingdom of Erebor, and the dragon Smaug lives in there, and he's a terrible beast. And they're like, oh, that was a Dwarven kingdom. They're like, well, let's both be dwarves. And let's be relatives.
Yeah.
We'll be relatives, and we want to be from that place. Now, meanwhile, the DM's like, well, this has nothing to do with my story or what I've planned out. This is like just a random point I put on my map. But he recognized that his players were all excited about it, so he's like, fine, we're going to go. Like, everybody's going to play dwarves. You're all going to be from this place, and you're going to be trying to find a way to go and kill this dragon and get the kingdom back. And then the one player is like, you know what? I don't want to play a dwarf. I'm going to be a hobbit. I'm going to be a halfling. So that's Bilbo comes in. But Colville does it. He's a writer. He's very well read, very well spoken. And he does a very great job of breaking that down. Whereas he's kind of more or less like he uses the Lord of the Rings as like a railroad, where it's like, no, you have to go through Mordor. No, you have to go through the Emyn through the razor sharp rocks. There's no way around it.
Yeah,
you can't get the Eagles to help you. No.
Yeah, you sent me that video and I watched that. That's a really good one, and it's very much what we're all even saying here. You know what I mean? Like, there's certain aspects of, hey guys, I have a cool idea that I want to have you guys play in, and this is the story. And then you decide to play that story, and then there's, hey, this is the map, and people are like, oh, these look really cool. Let's just venture around in there, and you're like, all right.
Yeah, and I think that it's kind of like, I feel like that it comes down to, again, like we can't stress this enough, but that's like the whole session 0 thing.
Yeah,
that's like, hey, I have an idea for a campaign, and this is what I'm thinking. Would you guys be interested in playing this? And you start bouncing ideas off of one another. Or you're like, hey, I was thinking about a game, and can you help me flesh it out? Can you help me, make it into something? Like, that's where, like, you would avoid that situation, like Colville was saying, like with the DM and the brothers being like, oh, we're going to be dwarves, and, we're just going to be at this random point on your map that has nothing to do with the campaign you planned. That's where your session 0 is just like, clutch, because you avoid that by saying, oh, okay, well, here's my story, and now I need you to make a character that at least is a part of this world.
Dude, all I know is session 0 is a hero. That's all I know.
Wow.
On that note, I say we bring this train into the station. And,
there's one thing I want to add on to that, Neil. You just made me very proud. But proud to be an American.
Yeah.
So it's Labor Day weekend while we're recording this, and I was at work, and one of my coworkers said something that, oh, it's going to be a big weekend, and I was kind of being a space cadet, and I said, well, why is that? And she says, oh, it's Labor Day weekend. Well, I'm kind of deaf from, heavy metal and power equipment. And I thought she said, it's Liberty weekend. And I was like, what the shit is Liberty weekend? And I was like, Liberty weekend? And she's like, no, Labor Day. I said, oh, I was confused. And she's like, why? And I said, because this is America. Every weekend's Liberty Weekend. And she was just like, wow.
Well, it seems like somebody cut the tracks right before we go to the station, man. So,
well, since this is our last podcast, I just want to thank everybody out there for joining us. Yeah. I think we bounced around a bunch of points. No matter what, it's going to come down to your group that you're working with here, and what the things that you're willing to sacrifice, give, and how you're willing to work together. Because if you're not working together, it's probably a railroad. If you're working against them, it's probably a railroad. Yep. If you're intentionally trying to kill somebody just to be spiteful, it's a railroad.
If you're only trying to tell your story, regardless of what your players and your friends want at the table, you're railroading.
That's fascism. But yeah, it's a railroad.
That's fascism.
Other than that, thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you around soon. Choo choo.